Hi, everyone. I'm Donato Cabrera, and welcome to MusicWise. I'm the music director of the California Symphony and the Las Vegas Philharmonic. I'm trying to think back to the first time, I think I remember the first time that I met Lara Downes. And what I've always so appreciated about Lara is her incredible conscientiousness, her dedication to her art form, and her connection to the community that surrounds us and supports us and loves us. And I'm so thrilled to welcome her this week to MusicWise. Hi.
Hi, that sounded like my cue.
Just like that. It's like the introduction to, a wonderful piano concerto.
Exactly. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me this week. I know that we're all now sort of in Zoom land, going from one, interview and conversation to the next, and while we're in the middle of it, of course, it's like, okay, where do I go? Who am I chatting with next? But you know what it is it's really part of our desire to remain connected. And we were talking about this yesterday, sort of in our pre-chat. And it's just, I think, a combination of just our personalities, of course, but our desire to remain connected because we're artists. Would you not agree?
Yeah. I mean, look, this is the test. This is the moment when, it becomes clear that whatever gets in the way, that we have to find our way, to still communicate and share and give. And, I keep thinking so much about the word gift, right? Because we end up being musicians because we have this gift that we're born with or whatever. Yeah, we're born with it. And then we work on it. But a gift is forgiving. And I think it's become really essential in this time to just keep giving and being.
Absolutely. And, I think that, and also, and we've said this, I know we both said this time and time again, that here we are using what is essentially new technology to us in a way to communicate our art and what we think about our art form. And of course, what we program and when we program it has become so essential for other reasons, which I know we'll talk about. I wanted to start off, as I so often do, with this show with a performance, and I'm such a fan of yours. I'm sure you know this, but this tiny desk concert that you did in the middle of, since the pandemic has begun, is really has a lot of what the Tiny Desk concert is all about, but also shows who you are as a performer and a communicator. Can you tell us a little bit about how this Tiny Desk concert came about? Because, things are so different now, including the Tiny Desk concerts.
Yeah, this was actually a tipping point or a learning moment for me, because the Tiny Desk concert was scheduled for mid-April. And even in March, when everything shut down, everyone kept holding out hope that I'd be able to get there by mid-April. And for some reason, I had this really rock solid conception of what this Tiny Desk was going to be, because you have your 15 minutes at the desk and you want to do something meaningful. And I had really planned it beautifully with the crew at NPR. I was going to have some kids from the local youth choir join me. And I just, I felt it. I was in my body. I knew what I was going to do. And so it was just so devastating when the phone call finally came and Tom said, we're evacuating the building and we're not going to be back. And will you do this from home? And I really struggled because that was such early days. I didn't even have half of the gear that I have now, and I kept trying to make it that thing. I kept trying to do here what I had been planning to do there. And it felt so bad and just sad. And then there was this moment I'll never forget. There was this breakthrough where I thought, well, no, I'm here now. This is a different thing. Just take a breath and do what feels right here. And I did. And I'm so grateful for that opportunity, because in retrospect, I think it was an incredibly honest and vulnerable moment. And it was the moment that I settled in to being here and being me from here and sharing in a different way. And, just like tapping into what is real and what is changing us and letting it inform, what I gave.
Did you end up changing the program?
Not essentially. I had no youth choir here in my house, but no, the rep stayed about the same. But just, I think the way I delivered it and the things I had to say about it, what those songs, I say songs because they are pieces that are based on spirituals. That's what I was, there's an album that had just come out. What they were meaning was so intensely different in a moment of, global devastation and this universal need to overcome something so massive.
Do you find it sort of serendipitous that you had an album of spirituals that had come out this year or recently, and find it apropos that you were sort of sharing this music to the world in this new way?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't plan it, I promise. It was very strange. The record came out on April 4th. So, we were in full throes of planning the, tour and all the stuff, and it all went away. And I really actually struggled about whether or not to just pull the project for the moment. But no, I mean, this music had so much resonance and relevance and felt so important, to demonstrate the cycles of our being, the cycles of our progress and, lack of progress and all the things. And then 1 month after, all of a sudden our country goes into this tailspin of, racial violence and racial division. And then the songs come back with yet another, layer of their meaning kind of exposed. So it's been a powerful experience to live with that music and share it again in a different way.
Well, we'll talk about the piece a little bit after we hear it, but we're going to be hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to be hearing "Troubled Water" by Margaret Bonds.
Mm-hmm.
You had a spoken. I wanted to. You wanted to. I think wanted to have the spoken introduction after that. But since we're not gonna, what did you wanted to talk? What did you want to say?
No, it was just, I think it's in my, you can just, you feel it in my voice and in the way that I spoke that day, because it was a different environment. It was my first comfortable feeling in this different environment. And you and I talked about this last night. It's been this journey, right? Not to try to replicate what we would have done on a stage, but to find a different way of being and playing and sharing. And I think it's very healthy.
Absolutely. I think from my experience so far with both of my orchestras, we were able to make the pivot quickly and start doing projects right away. But every week we're asking the question. We're now asking a question that we never had asked before. And I think it is very healthy for our world, which is, how do we continue to connect? What do we do now? What can we think of that's different, that's unique, that speaks to our institution or our voice? And I think as you've said, it's there was a little bit of a relaxation or not having to think about that so much, not only because of the pandemic, but because of what has happened in our world with racial justice and the decision to take for our industry, for our world to really be a voice finally in that world, right?
Yeah. Look, these are things that we've been talking about for a long time.
Yeah.
And now we're doing them, and that's different.
That's absolutely right. Now, this is from an album. You talked about this album that was released some of these days. Tell us about of course, this album had been planned long before all of these things happened. What were your thoughts going into this project, and why this music now?
I think the project was the next phase, the next layer of excavation. You know that for many years now, I've been sort of digging around in the surface of American music. And that comes from some very self-interested and, possibly selfish reasons. I mean, I, as an artist of color, who's deeply, deeply rooted in our classical tradition in one way, and outside of it, by virtue of, who I am and where I come from, I have felt the need to find the places where those two truths connect. And as I've gone along, it's been much less about me and much more about like the truth of this music, who it belongs to, who made it, who can appreciate it, who can use it, who can enter into it. And I mean, it's more and more all the time that I discover new truths about, under marginalized voices that contributed to this music, forgotten stories, all of it. So, going back years now, when I discovered composers like Florence Price and Margaret Bonds, and have been really committed to advocating for those composers, for those voices, because it's the more we know about this, the more authentic our music is, and the more it speaks to us as a people and as a country. So, on the heels of a few albums of American music that continue to try to widen that lens, really it became clear to me at a certain point that this is where it all starts. If you're talking about American music, this is where it starts. This is where our concert tradition, intersected with what came from Europe. This is where this is where jazz is born. This is where the blues is. It's like it's all in these ancient songs that come out of our worst thing ever, which is slavery. So to dig down into those songs and find the beauty in them and find the places that they've gone and the places where they've intersected, and all this evolution just became really fascinating and important to me. And then the timing of it, when these songs, which have of course been songs of protest, in many different times and many different struggles, and then they come back again in this moment, our moment of protest and change. But I think it just goes to show you that there are always cycles and there is always relevance. And I say that we can find that same relevance in Beethoven, whose birthday we're celebrating. We just have to look at the humanity in the music and not all the tradition and like convention that we've built up over it.
I've always said this to board members, to audience members, to my fellow musicians, that someone like Beethoven, the more we treat him like a marble bust, and less, and the more we lose out, because he was a real, honest to goodness person who lived down the street from someone that happened to play the piano and compose, like composers today, right?
Yeah,
And
right.
we can connect to his humanity. The more we can, and of course it's harder. Someone that was born 250 years ago, just like Shakespeare is, and all the great masters, it's actually harder for us to make those connections than with composers like Margaret Bond and Florence Price, because those folks were here and now, not that long ago,
That's right. Right.
And so I think that this human approach to music making is always needs to be the centerpiece for why we do what we do. And I'm curious, there's so much of, you come up with this project. How did you end up choosing what you chose? Because you can only put 10 or 12, 15 things on an album, right? How did you choose the specific pieces?
I mean, it was, of course, there's that process of elimination, and there's so much more, and there is so much more, and I'm sure I'll get back to it. But I think there were a few touch points. For me, my access to that whole tradition comes with this moment, really in the 20s, 30s, 40s, Harlem Renaissance, Chicago Black Renaissance, where people like Florence Price make this really important decision. I want to enter into this world of classical music, this white world, this, European-based world. I want to make my mark here. I want to be respected and acknowledged, and I don't want to lose my own language, right? So she's writing symphonies that contain all of these themes and influences from, the Black church, from Arkansas, where she had to, leave to escape atrocities. But to make that decision, not to leave it behind, but to pull it into this tradition, that to me is an essential moment. And then, there's like everything that happened during the Harlem Renaissance. My dad, who died when I was small, was born in Harlem, and obviously a bit after that. But I think that's my place. That's like my place where I lock into it. And then I think there was also this idea of all these songs that were kind of part of my babyhood in this weird way, because my parents were involved in the civil rights movement, And so what are these songs that were getting sung on the March on Washington, but they go all the way back? And, where did they go in the meantime? Where do they fit now? It was really a sort of just doing a puzzle, I think. And it was so interesting because I remember over the December holiday, I sat down to write the liner notes. And as I was listening to the tracks and thinking what I wanted to say about them, every single song had this like incredible immediacy about it. The album starts out with this recording of Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child, where I sampled a 1939 Lomax field recording from rural Florida, these women who were in a penitentiary in rural Florida. So there's these like ghostly, crackly voices, right? And then it goes into this piano soliloquy. But I'm just listening to those words. And at that moment in December, the news is full of children being separated from their parents at the border. And it just, as I went through, every song had its connection to our present struggles. And so again, it's, nothing changes and everything changes, and we respond.
I mean, obviously, the unfortunate timelessness of the subject matter is always something that causes reflection and bewilderment, and of course, we can always look to history to find reflection, to find meaning. Yes, we would all wish that these things weren't around still with us, but it is part of our. And to think about this idea that I find it wonderful that in your discovery of the story of Florence Price is sort of a reflection of your own personal journey.
Sure. Look, we're all outsiders in one way or another, right? We all have our things to overcome. I wanted to say just about what you were just talking about this, repetition, but it's important to remember too, I think, when we're looking at our history and looking at where we are now, that every time we come to a place like this, we have more underneath us and behind us. I was just, before I jumped on with you, I was doing a conversation for my show that I do on NPR Music, and we were talking about this. We were talking about kind of standing on the shoulders of the ancestors. And what that means is that every time we have a wider vantage point, you know, we're higher up, we can see better, we can see more clearly. So I think, you know, I don't want to think of us as just like going back. It's more like this, right? Yeah.
No, that's absolutely true. And I think about, of course, Dvorak came to the United States and wanted to teach us what we're now again discovering, which is the root of our music, of our culture, is the spiritual and the cultural artifacts and realities of the American Indian. And you know, he was telling that to us in the 1880s and 1890s, and here we are, this rediscovering that fact. But like what you said, we have a century of perspective, of incredible music making that we can draw upon and celebrate. Which is what this album does.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yes. We have such a strange relationship to the past, I think, as you know, musicians in this tradition, right? And I think it's so important to stay connected to the fact that the past is there for us to build on, not for us to just like sink into.
Absolutely. I was thinking back when I started the show. I was thinking back to when we first met, and you reached out to me at the time I was the new music director of the San Francisco Symphony Youth Orchestra, and you are a former member. Now I'm a former music director, but that world of the youth orchestra still has a very strong pull, I think, for everyone that has been in the youth orchestra, for the select few who've been the music directors of the youth orchestra. This is sort of a touchstone for our lives. Can you talk a little bit about your experience in this very, very special ensemble?
Yeah. Well, for me, it was community. You know, my sisters and I had just a strange childhood. We were homeschooled, and we were, you know, classical music nerds. So it was isolating. So for me, just getting to Davies Hall for rehearsal, you know, being in that space with all my fellow nerds, you know, and making this cacophony of sound, right? Because also as a pianist, the instrument itself is isolated. So it was really an outlet, and it was really that first feeling of community and this recognition that, you know, this thing that I cared about so passionately was a shared passion. And I think also the relationship that we had with the orchestra members, you know, in terms of mentorship and coaching, it really changed everything. And I think we would all say that it was formative in terms of encouraging us to know just more about the wide world of music. You know, I think to have that one-on-one experience and that insight into what a career looks like, what a professional life in music looks like. It's really necessary. Sometimes I get so upset when I see music students who seem to be doing their work so much in isolation, right? I mean, even the necessity of going to live concerts, just having an interface with the reality of this thing that you're trying to learn to do. It's so important, and not everybody gets that.
It's so true. I've often told, especially when I was the music director of the youth orchestra, so many of them were at that point in their lives where they were just becoming wonderfully obsessed with this art form. But, you know, yes, and believe me, as a pianist, you know this, and as like a violinist, the amount of time that you could spend in the practice room is practically limitless because of the sheer amount of repertoire that is expected of you. But it's, as you said, it's also important to realize that while this is an art form that does require a lot of alone time, it also requires of you, and it's an art form that requires of you sooner rather than later to become connected to the community around you, and how this music is a gift to others.
Yeah. And that mentorship piece too. I think, I'm sure I didn't realize it at the time, and there's a disconnect between then and now. But all of this awareness that you have of somebody who's achieved already, who is, flourishing in the musical world, taking the time to reach out a hand to help you, all of those things add up too, and they inform what you do when it's time to pay it forward and time to, take on a role of mentorship. And how important that is to me now.
Absolutely. Another very appropriate video I feel that we're sharing today is this next incredible piece by Leonard Bernstein, "Take Care of This House." Tell us about this so appropriate project.
So appropriate.
So appropriate.
Yeah. So, I don't know, how many months is it ago? Maybe 4 months ago or something. I was just kind of going about my business, living through this crazy time, watching this crazy election cycle unfold. And I all of a sudden just realized it's time to do something with this song. So, for anyone who's not familiar, this is a song that he wrote for a musical called 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, which was an examination of the first 100 years of the White House, and really like a profound examination, looking at the flaws and the problems and the reality of it. And it opened on Broadway in the bicentennial year, 1976, and nobody wanted to hear anything about it. And it was a historic flop. Was it 3 nights or 4 nights, I think, that the show survived? But this song has survived, and it's such an exquisite song. And it's really about the White House as the home and the hope of all of us, and that it's our duty to protect it and our duty to keep it safe. And so the moment I thought about, just the here and now of it, my first call was to the Bernstein family, asking if, if they were down with that, which they emphatically were, and helped me jump through some hoops, just get the rights and things. And then I just started reaching out to friends and colleagues. And I guess we're going to show the video, but it was such a beautiful moment of coming together, right? In this time of isolation, when we have been feeling so keenly that lack of community in our music making. Mm-hmm. And just the simple act of taking your iPhone and recording a line of a song and having it become part of this bigger thing, I think it offered so much joy to us. And also, this feeling of doing something. It was a partnership with the ACLU for the Voting Rights Project. And so, it also carried messages with it about what people could do to help in their communities, to help with voter registration, to help against voter suppression. And looking back, I think that all of these small efforts in this election really did have a difference, because information was sometimes hard to come by. So yeah, it was a labor of love. It was a lot of work. It was really beautiful.
Let's watch it.
Take care of this house, keep it from harm. If bandits break in, sound the alarm. Care for this house, shine it by hand, and keep it so clean the glow can be seen all over the land. Be careful at night, lock all the doors. If someone makes off with a dream will be yours. Take care of this house, be always on call. For this house is the hope of us all. begins, sound the alarm. Care of this house, shine of my head, and keep it so clean, the glow can be seen all over the lane. Be careful at night, check all the doors. If someone makes off with a dream, the dream will be yours. Take care of this house, be always on call. Care for this house, it's the hope of us all.
I got all weepy.
I did too. It's see our thank you for bringing together so many of our friends to sing this. Bernstein has this incredible throughout his entire life, getting to the heart of the matter in pieces specifically like this that comes to mind. These sort of introspective, simple messages. He could bring it.
Yeah, and such a person of his time, right? Always responding, I think, and being present. It's really a lesson.
I have loved so much to watch, and I hate to use the word career because it's not a career. It's sort of more of like a journey. Mm-hmm. Your journey has been so remarkable to witness, and I think so many of us could say we would have never known that we would be doing, like, for instance, what we're doing right now a year ago. Mm-hmm. And yet here we are, and it makes a difference. And I'm curious, from that first time that we had our little coffee together, in 11 plus years ago, where did you see yourself then? We were also talking a little bit about the youth orchestra, and I do want to bring this up because being a pianist in an orchestra is a very unique and wonderful thing that very few people outside of our world even know about, really. I mean, because most concerts, even with a major symphony orchestra, doesn't necessarily even have the orchestral pianist on stage. But it's such a cool and unique art form, like a very, very specific art form within the world of piano. Was this something that you were contemplating back in the day?
No, I think I was just doing it because it was fun, and that's where the kids were. It was largely terrifying because you have to count so many measures of rests, and I have to tell you something so hilarious, and this is so embarrassing. But like a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, I was doing a concert in Houston with an orchestra there, and I was playing a concerto, and then sort of by the by, the conductor reached out and said, "Oh, we want to do this other piece, this Martin New piece, and it has a piano part. Would you consider playing it?" And I, being a good citizen, was like, "Yes, sure. How hard? Of course." I didn't think about it. I get there, we get into rehearsal. I was so terrible. I was sitting in the back, right? So I'm not hearing any of the things that I've been listening to on the recording. I can't hear those instruments. I still can't follow a conductor, right? He's doing all these measures of rest. I don't know where I am. I was a disaster. I ruined their rehearsals, and I was so humbled. I was like, oh my God, these players are so much better than I am. So I guess some of that got lost along the way.
I did a similar ask to probably someone Andrew Armstrong, and he came in to do a performance of Rhapsody in Blue, the original jazz band version. And on the program, we also did Bernstein's Prelude, Fugue, and Riffs, which has an incredible piano part. And he had never done it before. And I asked him, it wasn't last minute. I said, hey, would you be interested in doing the piano part to this? He said, yeah, so fun. But I tell you, at the same sort of thing after the first rehearsal, he just sort of like walked off the stage with, you know, from the rehearsal, like, oh, wow, this is a lot. I can tell. So one of the many incredible projects you've become involved with is very recent, which is this wonderful project with NPR called Amplify, and it's a similar format, but it has a very specific and wonderful mission. Can you talk a little bit about Amplify and how it came to be, and what your goal is with it?
Yeah. Well, it goes back to me being, you know, a soloist and being lonely a lot of the time. So my community is really important to me. I love collaborating. I love, you know, the chance to work with friends and colleagues on the road. And I think one of the things that was very, very hard for me when everything shut down in March was just being locked down and, you know, not having those interactions. And at the same time, we all had kind of some time. And I just had this impulse to just start reaching out, talking on the phone to people that I don't talk to, you know, nearly as often as I would like. And that was really, it was really healing. I first started just talking on the phone. Then I started recording some of the conversations for the Sphinx organization, which is, you know, an important part of my professional, my musical life. And I learned that.
Sorry, Laura, just to jump in. Just give us a brief, for those of us that are watching that don't know about the Sphinx organization, can you just give a little, it's such a wonderful organization, just give a brief overview what is, also put a link to their website.
Oh, good, thank you. Yeah, the Sphinx organization is based in Detroit and goes back now 20 years, I want to say maybe 21 now, was founded with the mission of increasing diversity in the classical music world, especially in the orchestral world. And they have been phenomenal in achieving that goal. And really, you know, if we're talking about, you know, standing on the shoulders of people who come forward, that effort has really made huge change in the music world, and for our generation, and certainly for the next generation. So I was fortunate enough to be awarded the Medal of Excellence in 2016, which is an award that's given to sort of pioneers, innovators, change makers in the music world. And it's been such a meaningful relationship, and you know, an important community for me. So I started having these conversations with some of the people that you saw in the video. Eileen Perez, I think, was the first person I talked to, and we were all just shell shocked and, you know, devastated and kind of terrified, and nobody knew, you know, when, how, what, anything, why. But at the same time, I saw us begin these processes of self-examination and kind of drilling down to the core of what we have, which is, as you and I have discussed, the why of what we do, which quite often, you know, in the course of just running around and, you know, staying on your calendar and fulfilling your engagements, you might not think about every day. And I saw this, and I saw that clearly this was going to be a time of transformation. And, you know, we were already beginning the process of that transformation in an interior way. So I'm having these conversations. At the same time, conversations are starting, you know, sort of on the institutional level about diversity in the field, and how do we create more diversity, inclusion, equity, all the things which were really important conversations. There were a lot of roundtable discussions happening about future change. But I saw that these conversations were about the present, like really clearly, firmly about the present. So I reached out to NPR, sent them, you know, some clips, and they have been absolutely wonderful about seeing the immediacy of that and seeing the importance of documenting the change. And so I started the series last month. It's bi-weekly on Saturdays on npr.org and YouTube, and just, you know, it's just video Zooms like this. And my first guest was Rhiannon Giddens, and then I chatted with Anthony McGill. Last week was Helga Davis, and this Saturday coming up is Julia Bullock. And we're just having really open, vulnerable, funny sometimes conversations about lineage, legacy, identity, sense of purpose, mentorship, guidance, like building the future. It's really, it's quite enlightening what's happening.
Without we have just a couple of months now of sort of looking back and assessing if indeed change is actually happening this time.
Right.
But and please weigh in on this. My feeling is that there does seem to be a sense of purpose. There does seem to be a sense of really wanting to change now from not just organizations that can do it quicker, which is usually not the big organizations, but actual organizations are now sort of really making what seems to me to be steps forward in the right direction.
I absolutely think so. And I think that truly what it is a desire to be better, and also a desire to shed some of the things that we have known for a long time to be problematic. Mm-hmm. The imbalances, the lack of access, the strange distribution of resources. These things have been plaguing us throughout our lives, for you and for me, certainly, right? I don't think anybody would say that this was all healthy and thriving before. And so it's a chance to regroup and to reconsider. The things that I keep thinking about are redefining the words community, the words audience. These are really important things which have been hindered by just like rigid structures, geography, convention. I think what's awesome right now is that every time I do one of these virtual concerts, my audience is everywhere and everyone. Mm-hmm. Just that alone. The fact that my audience is no longer confined to who can fit inside the hall and who can pay for a ticket.
Absolutely. I completely agree. It's very freeing in a way. And it's this what this has also shown, sort of the strange realities of our world. From my point of view, seeing that every major orchestra, this is actually the first time this has been the case, I don't know, probably in 50 years. There's not one major orchestra that has an American music director. This is the time in many, and that has played out in a very unique way these last few months. Not one major orchestra has an American music director right now. And I think these sort of questions by boards and musicians and search committees and artistic administrators, I think that sort of reality, I don't know if that's, that just needs to be thought about again. What that means to have a music director that's not really part of the community, that live in the community with that much frequency. Mm-hmm. Let's watch a little bit of your first, which was with Ryan.
Good.
Let's watch it.
I feel like the work lives that we have both led in very different ways involve a lot of isolation, like sort of emotional isolation. And now here we are truly isolated. And yet I feel so much more connected in so many ways. I think, yes, because of the time, because of this impulse, but also because we have now a moment to reach out and reach in. And I feel like a lot of things are coming together that wouldn't have come together if we were still running around like chickens with our heads cut off.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. I think in a lot of ways, except for the whole like not performing thing. I mean, I think that we're all having a hard time with that. But other than that, I think in a lot of ways, our lifestyles have kind of perfectly situated us for this, because all of us are on the road so much that we are relishing the time at home. And then, just like you said, there's these opportunities to work with people that usually you're both like, and you're like, okay, so 2024.
Like, what are we making of this time and what are we making in this time? I really am wondering how all of this will inform our practice when we do get back out on a stage. You know, we kind of, there's like an intimacy, and I don't know about you, but I feel also willing to be completely real, and, you know, and have the dog walk through the video, and, you know, all these things, that all the trappings having gone away. So what does that feel like the next time that, you know, there is a stage manager and they do say 5 minutes to curtain, you know, and you walk out and there's lights? It's going to feel different.
I mean, I lost that long ago because I play the banjo. And there's no need for perfection when you're a banjo player. No, I mean, seriously though, when I entered the folk world, you know, that was kind of my first lesson and what I had to let go. You know, it's almost too relaxed now. It's like,
you're like, wait, I have to wear pants?
Exactly. It's like, oh, like, because we actually did a couple of gigs for the first time a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah,
we did a couple of in-person gigs, myself and Francesco.
I wanted to listen to more.
Well, it's such a funny conversation because we were just having fun. Then there's this very profound bit at the end. Maybe we want to fast forward towards the end, because we're really talking at the end about this thing that brings us, you know, creates our friendship and our collaboration, which is getting to the root of American music, like we were talking about earlier. So I feel like maybe sort of 3 minutes from the end.
Well, as Maggie does that and finds that spot, I just want to talk a little bit about her as a performer, because maybe I just put a link to her website, but I have been such a fan of her for so many. What an incredible voice, incredible musician. I mean, she is one of those people who can show us back into our past and inform us about our present, which will give us the steps to take for our future, isn't she?
Exactly. You know, I first met her at in San Francisco. It was, I think, the first Symphony Pops concert she had ever done.
That's right. And Edwin was conducting, and I saw you there. Yeah.
Yeah. And this support, like, mutual fan of both of ours, had invited me to go, and he was also sponsoring the concert, which I didn't realize at the time. So I'm sitting next to him, and I didn't know that much about her. I wasn't like one of her devoted bluegrass fans, so I didn't even have that whole knowledge base. I knew her first solo album, which spoke to me in exactly the ways that you just mentioned. But I'm sitting there next to this gentleman, and she did a set that was like, so there was some Gershwin, there was some Weill, there were some spirituals, there were a couple of her own original things, and she was just like transmitting this connective thread. You know, here it is. And, you know, I think she was really excited because it was this new environment. It was like I was looking into a mirror for the first time, because here I am out in my own little wilderness, you know, with my Florence Price and my stuff, and like saying, look, there's more to this than you know. But it was the first time that I saw somebody, granted, coming from a, you know, different vantage point or beginning point, but it was just so, it was, I recognized so much. And then afterwards we went to this dinner, and she and I just sat next to each other and just talked, you know, throughout the dinner about this work and how much it means, how hard it can be, and the, you know, the vast potential for it. And what we talk about here, you'll see, is really, you know, in a time like this, when there's so much division and there's so much lack of comprehension, and even sort of basic human experiences are not enough to pull us together anymore. That place in the music that shows us we come from the same place, you know, that place is really, really powerful.
So true. I think Maggie has found the spot where she.
Okay, great.
That will always stay with me, because I think that, you know, there's so much fear right now. There's so much feeling of like guilt and shame. And instead, for us to offer these stories as a connecting, healing.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the only way to do it. It's like when I started with the Carolina Chocolate Drops, you know, it was very different. You know, the atmosphere was very different. And we were coming into, you know, it's slowly changed a bit by bits, you know, over the last, like, you know, 30, 40 years. But we came in at a moment where we're still pretty firmly like, banjo's white. Like, what are y'all even doing here? What's going on? And what we discovered was just presenting things in a very like, look, we didn't know this either. Here we go. Isn't this exciting? Isn't this cool? This is not taking away from you. This is adding to you. This is adding to what you know. And that approach, I feel like, has served me well ever since. And I've kind of adapted it to everything going forward. It's like, it's not starting off the evening with, this is what you, it's like, look, you know, and people respond to that in a very positive way, you know?
It's what teaching should be. I mean, I keep wondering out of this time, what happens to, you know, history books? How many years does it take before children in school are learning a different version of the history? And what does that mean, you know, to grow up American and know the truth of this history and not, you know, believe that the Pilgrims came here and had a party with, you know, the native people, right? But to know the truth of it, doesn't it just make us stronger and healthier and like able to carry forward?
There's been a very good job done on people to believe that you're taking away their, you know, we don't have the banjo anymore. No, you have the banjo too.
Right. There are two banjos.
Yeah, everybody's like Oprah. You get a banjo, you get a banjo, everybody gets a banjo, you know, because it's like banjo is everywhere. It's like the quintessential American instrument. It went everywhere.
There was a moment, I will admit that there was a moment, you know, back in April when I thought, well, maybe it's all done. Maybe, you know, I don't perform anymore. Maybe, you know, the world is actually shut down forever. And I had to think about what I've done so far. And, you know, I realized that there's some things to be really proud of and just happy to leave behind. And I think, I mean, the central part of that, and God knows, you know, you've done it. You could hang up your banjo today, but, you know, to leave those stories out there, to know that the music that we've made that like rectifies some things and clarifies some things lives.
Yeah, I mean, that's all you can hope for is like one person who decided to do XYZ because of what we do, you know.
And I think, you know, there's a whole new chapter coming and we have to keep telling the stories.
There is a chance of a great spiritual awakening if we can find that path that is the path of kindness and inclusion. Because it's very easy to go down the other path of fear and exclusion. That's where art, I think, comes in, is that we need to lead the way down that path, you know, however we can.
We'll keep at it. You can always use my machete.
You know, I got one for you too. So sharpening it.
I just, you can tell that she has the conviction to take us where we need to go.
I'll tell you something. Conviction, it takes conviction. I remember back last year, I was, I don't know, on some epic, you know, road trip, and I was tired. I was just tired. And I don't remember what time zones we were respectively in, but I just called her and I said, do you ever just feel so tired? And she, you know, we just talked about how doing this work and the work that you do too. I feel like the work that we do is mission-based. You know, it really is. It's got a deeper purpose. And that can be really exhausting sometimes because you're constantly putting in the energy, you're constantly educating yourself and other people, you're constantly inventing and evolving. You know, it's like, I get it why people play the same concerto every night, leave it at that. No, but you know, to do this work, to do the work that we're talking about as formative and essential right now, formative and transformative, this is how we have to do this work. And I think that, you know, you and I, in our mentorship of young musicians, this is the message. Like, this doesn't stop, and it's going to be hard, and you have to keep insisting, because otherwise things don't change and this art form doesn't progress into a healthy, growing future.
I want to end with this new project that you told me about yesterday, and it's called Rising Sun, and it's exactly what you're talking about now, which is continuing this into the future. Tell us about how this got started and what you plan on doing.
And I'm going to pull up. I'm going to pull up just a web link that you can put, because I should have given this to you yesterday. So this is, I've done some, I think, important work in finding out about performing, recording, and teaching about the music of these composers whose lives and music and legacy and stories have been really just lost. And because of all the different facets of my work, I'm aware of how far that goes and how much further it could go. And I think that the key to expanding the repertoire, redefining the canon, retelling the stories lies in recordings. And for so many reasons, so much of this music has never been recorded. So I put together a proposal to do a series of recordings called Rising Sun, which comes from Lift Every Voice and Sing, which is the Black national anthem. And it will release music that's never been heard before, never been recorded before. Almost 200 years worth of music by Black composers. Some composers that you've heard of and some that I promise you've never heard of, but music that just needs to be part of what we hear on the radio and what we hear on our Spotify playlists and what we teach to young kids who are just starting their lives in music, and music that leads to more research and more discovery. And it'll be a long-term project.
Who are you reaching out to? Various musicologists? Are you doing the research on your own? How are you going about just uncovering this music?
Yeah, I've developed some really wonderful relationships. There's a musicologist named Michael Cooper, who is based at Southwestern University in Texas, who has been my partner in crime with all of the Florence Price music and the Margaret Bonds music, and has just been so devoted and obsessive as only a musicologist can be. I'm working with Rachel Barton Pine, who has her music by Black composers database, which is always extending, and reaching out to scholars and researchers and just trying to learn more and more and more. And it's so, I'm a huge nerd about this stuff. I love the process of discovery and research and just going down rabbit holes. And I'm so excited about the potential for this, within the next couple of years, but within 20 years, the potential to really just change what this music sounds like.
Well, I know that I'm going to be going down that rabbit hole with you. I know it.
Good.
So
you're welcome.
I want to thank you so much for joining us for this hour. As is usual, this hour just flies by because
it really does. I'm so glad we could do this. Thank you for having me.
And I look forward to everything you do in the future, and we'll talk soon, I'm sure. Thanks.
You too. Keep the faith. All right. Thanks.